Hey everyone! Welcome to Update X24H, your go-to channel for the latest news, hottest dramas, breaking stories, and all the buzz from the world of entertainment. We're here to keep you updated, entertained, and always in the loop. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing family, because here at Update X24H, we bring you the news that matters, the drama you love, and the stories you can't miss. Thanks for being part of our community. Let's stay connected, stay updated, and keep the good vibes rolling. What if the most shocking moment in a so-called scandal was not a fight, not an accusation, but a man in tears holding an ultrasound photo saying, "I choose my family over everything you think you know about me"? Tonight on Update X24H, we are not just talking about headlines. We are stepping into a rare moment where fame, pressure, love, and responsibility collide in front of the cameras. This is the story of Yulong, the emergency press conference, Yang Mei Mei's family, and the truth that moved an entire room to silence. Stay with me until the end because this is not just about them. It is also about us. The way we look at celebrities and the way we choose to treat real human beings behind the screen. No one truly expected what would unfold that afternoon. On November 13, 2025, the media gathered in the conference hall believing they were attending just another routine clarification, perhaps a denial, perhaps a carefully crafted statement prepared by a publicist. Instead, they walked into something far more fragile and human. On the stage stood Yulong, not in a glamorous outfit but in a simple, subdued suit, his posture tense yet determined. Beside him were Yang Mei Mei's parents, not smiling for the cameras, not playing the part of celebrity in-laws, but looking like any mother and father who had spent too many nights worrying about their child. Mei Mei herself was absent, and her empty seat spoke louder than any prepared line. From the moment Yulong stepped up to the microphone, it was clear that this would not be a performance. His first words were not defensive nor angry. He began with an apology directed not at the press, but at his wife's family, acknowledging the burden they had carried because of his name, his work, and the world that surrounded them. The room, usually filled with rustling papers and clicking cameras, fell noticeably still. Journalists who had arrived ready to dissect every phrase suddenly found themselves witnessing something far more uncomfortable to analyze. A man stripping away his public persona, choosing honesty over image. This was not the press conference anyone had predicted. It was the moment the story stopped being about gossip and became about people. For months, their lives had been reduced to fragments and headlines. One rumor became a screenshot, one argument became a thread, and strangers who had never met them spoke with complete confidence about what was happening inside their home. To the outside world, Yulong and Yang Mei Mei existed as characters in an ongoing drama, constantly edited and reinterpreted for entertainment. Yet as Yulong began to speak at the press conference, that distance slowly dissolved. He did not list accusations or point fingers at specific names. Instead, he described the quiet damage done by whispers and speculation. How a distorted story could travel faster than any truth. How a careless comment online could echo late at night in someone else's bedroom. He admitted that there were people who had used their pain as a source of excitement, people who exaggerated problems and fed conflict, not because they hated them, but because it made life more interesting for a moment. What the audience in the room, and later the viewers at home, started to see was not a scandal but a young couple trying to breathe under the weight of other people's narratives. Gossip had painted them as dramatic, unstable, even selfish. In his own words, however, Yulong showed something completely different. Fear, confusion, guilt, and a desperate wish to protect someone he loved. In that shift from neatly packaged storylines to raw, unpolished emotion, the distance between celebrity and human being almost entirely disappeared. For a long time, the public saw only the surface of Yang Mei Mei. The flawless photos, the careful styling, the bright smile that appeared on cue whenever a camera was near. She seemed effortlessly graceful, the kind of woman who glided through the noise of fame untouched. Yet, as her husband and her mother spoke, a very different portrait emerged, one that revealed a quiet, stubborn strength that had nothing to do with image. Behind closed doors, Mei Mei was not untouched by what people said. She read the comments, she heard the rumors, and they cut more deeply than anyone knew. There were nights when she sat on the edge of the bed, torn between the desire to defend herself and the exhaustion of constantly having to justify simply existing. Still, each morning she chose to get up, to work, to show kindness to people who might one day misunderstand her. She began to create small rituals of survival, writing down her fears so they would not drown her, stepping away from her phone when the noise became too loud, allowing herself to cry without feeling ashamed. She did not fight back with public statements or dramatic gestures. Her resistance was quieter, choosing not to let bitterness shape her, choosing to protect the child growing inside her, choosing to believe that the people who truly mattered would see beyond the chaos. The hidden strength of Yang Mei Mei lay not in never breaking, but in her decision to continue loving, trusting, and hoping, even while standing in the shadow of a world ready to misjudge her. There was a point in the press conference when the atmosphere in the room shifted so completely that it felt as if the air itself had changed. Until then, Yulong had spoken of pressure, betrayal, and exhaustion, the kind of heavy truths that already demanded courage. But when he paused, glanced briefly at Yang Mei Mei's parents and then reached into his jacket, something in his expression grew even more vulnerable. His voice softened as he said that there was one truth no rumor had managed to touch, one reason behind every difficult decision they had made in silence. Then, carefully, he placed an ultrasound image on the podium. He did not raise it dramatically. He simply laid it down, as if he were placing a fragile secret before the world and trusting it not to be broken. In that instant, all the noise surrounding their name seemed to fall away. The accusations, the speculation, the endless guessing games online were suddenly reduced to background static. What remained was a small, shadowy outline on a screen, the first visible sign of a life that had already transformed them. Yulong explained that Yang Mei Mei was 3 months pregnant, that this tiny heartbeat was the center around which all their choices now revolved. It was the reason he had turned down projects, the reason they had withdrawn from certain people, the reason they were willing to let the public misunderstand them rather than expose their child to more chaos. The moment was not theatrical. It was profoundly simple. And precisely because of that simplicity, it changed everything. In the weeks leading up to that press conference, the decisions made by Yulong and Yang Mei Mei's family were not glamorous, dramatic gestures, but a series of quiet, determined choices that slowly redrew the map of their lives. Once, they had accepted that being in the public meant constant visibility, endless commentary, and a certain loss of control. Now, with a child on the way and Mei Mei's well-being hanging in the balance, they began to question that bargain. Together, they decided that survival required more than patience. It required boundaries. There were calls that went unanswered, invitations politely declined, familiar faces gently but firmly held at a distance. They stopped explaining themselves to people who cared more about access than understanding. Yulong sat with his team and reworked his contracts, not as a star negotiating for more fame, but as a husband and father-to-be insisting on time, privacy, and respect for his family's limits. For the first time, he was willing to let opportunities pass if they came at the cost of Mei Mei's peace of mind. Inside the home, 2 new rules took shape. No late-night scrolling through hateful comments, no sharing of gossip disguised as concern, no allowing the day's headlines to dictate the atmosphere at the dinner table. These changes did not erase the noise outside, but they created a small circle of safety within it. In choosing differently, they were not only protecting their present, they were quietly building a gentler world for the child who had already begun to change them. Long before their child could open its eyes or hear their voices clearly, it had already become the silent witness to a vow made in front of cameras and strangers. Standing beside Yang Mei Mei's parents, with the ultrasound image still resting on the podium, Yulong understood that this moment was no longer just about clearing his name or correcting a story. It was about defining the kind of world he and Mei Mei wanted their child to enter. He spoke carefully, choosing words that felt less like a statement to the press and more like a promise spoken aloud so that he could never retreat from it later. He promised that their home would not be ruled by the rise and fall of public opinion, that their child would not grow up learning to measure their worth by trends, views, or headlines. Mei Mei's mother added her own quiet commitment, that she would help shield the next generation from the bitterness and fear that had sometimes settled over the adults. Between them, an unspoken agreement formed, that love in this family would not be something performed, but something protected. In making that promise to their child, they were also making a promise to themselves, to step back when the noise grew too loud, to choose honesty over image, to admit when they were tired instead of pretending to be invincible. The future was still uncertain, and they could not control how the world would speak about them. But they could decide how they would speak to their child, and that decision, quietly made in the glare of the spotlight, carried a weight deeper than any script. In the aftermath of everything they had endured, it would have been easy for Yulong and Yang Mei Mei's family to close their doors, draw the curtains and focus solely on their own healing. No one would have blamed them for choosing silence. Yet as the press conference drew towards its end, it became clear that they did not want their suffering to exist only as a painful memory. Yulong spoke about the countless messages they had received from strangers describing their own battles with anxiety, online cruelty, and the crushing expectations placed on young parents. He admitted that for a long time, he had felt ashamed that he could not simply handle it better. Now he said he understood that the real strength lay not in pretending to be untouched, but in using their experience to make it less lonely for someone else. They were not announcing a grand campaign or trying to reinvent themselves as heroes. Instead, they hoped to support conversations about mental health, kinder online behavior, and the right of women, especially expectant mothers, to set limits without being judged. In choosing to let their pain inform something gentler and more generous, they refused to let it be the final word on who they were. For those of us watching from a distance, it is tempting to treat stories like Yulong and Yang Mei Mei's as something separate from our own lives, a kind of ongoing drama that begins and ends on a screen. Yet their press conference gently challenges that comfort. It reminds us that every headline we click, every rumor we repeat, every joke we make about someone we do not know lands somewhere in a real person's day. We may never send a hateful message or write a cruel comment, but indifference can also be a form of harm when it allows a culture of casual cruelty to grow unchecked. Seeing a man stand in tears beside his wife's parents, seeing a family speak openly about fear, exhaustion, and the need for boundaries, invites us to examine our own part in the noise. It asks whether we are willing to be slower to judge, quicker to show empathy, more careful with the way we speak about others online. Perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is also the most hopeful, that if our attention can help fuel a storm, it can also help to calm one. The choice, quietly, rests with us.